Haha!
Hello and welcome back. If you're just joining us, we've been live streaming all day today. The Court of the Dead Mourners Call tabletop game Kickstarter launched this morning at 9 a.m. and we funded after just 5 hours and 8 minutes of going live. Thank you all so much for your support. I'm here at Sideshow headquarters with Tom Gilliland, our Chief Creative Officer and creator of the Court of the Dead, and Pat Marino, designer of the Court of the Dead board game. And we're going to talk a little bit about Mourners, because the game is called Mourners Call. Who are Mourners and what are they calling for?
So the Mourners are essentially the sort of aware, sentient citizens of the underworld. And in this particular game, they represent kind of the mainstay of the movers and shakers or whatnot. So you've got the court deck, which is the big power players. Mm-hmm. The Mourners are like the people who are out there getting it done.
So let's take a look here. These are the Mourner decks. We've looked at them. Each of them are divided into the 3 underworld factions, bone, flesh, and spirit. You can look at some of our previous videos we've posted from earlier that will go into the factions and what they are. But here are some of those Mourners. So as a player, Pat, you are actually a Mourner, but you can also play with Mourners in some different capacities. Can you speak to a little bit about that in the gameplay?
Yeah, so the idea is you yourself are now a member of this world, and you're vying for influence and to really build your own reputation and place in this world. But you're going to need the help of all these other characters. So the court cards that we talked about earlier, you only can really use those for the round, and then they go back in the draft because they're just too powerful for you to maintain influence over and with. But these characters are some of the characters that will sort of join you and align with you throughout the game. And there's some different ways that these work. Some of them will resolve during the cleanup phase. So at the end of the round, we have this cleanup phase, and you'll get benefits and abilities during that time. Others give you actions that you can use once per round in the action phase. So as sort of as a turn option, you can activate their power and carry out that action. There are some instants, so as soon as you recruit those Mourners, they have an effect that happens immediately, which is to your benefit. And then they're more or less resolved, although they do count towards some of your totals in terms of Mourner cards in play and things like that. And so you have this variety of ways that these characters act and then interact with each other to sort of build up combos that can feel really powerful. You know, Tom talked earlier about having Colonel Tatterburn and Ravlatch, and you get that kind of combo, and it builds and feeds off of, the 2 cards feed off of each other. And there's really that strategic depth there because you have cards that stay in front of you to use.
Yeah, it's a nice place too, because these cards are like where the mythology and the character kind of, the pantheon meets the strategy. And so, this is where you get to kind of see like what the denizens of the underworld are really like. So
I'm going to lay these out so we can do an overhead shot, actually.
A whole spread of spies, chancellors, archaeologists.
This is unique artwork on every single card, right?
Yes, every card is unique. Every card is kind of a character sheet in its own regards and whatnot. And these, so like as you are a Mourner trying to pull the big picture, influence together, these are kind of your Mourner allies that stay with you through the game. So this is the interesting part of the strategy, and where it gets really diverse is that no 2 games are you going to have the same sort of host of allies in kind of your party or whatnot. Mm-hmm. And so figuring out how the different ones synergize with each other has been, a tremendous amount of fun for both figuring out how the relationships in the story work as well as how their relationships in the game then play out.
Cool. Let's hold that thought. We have a couple items to actually give away, so I'm going to introduce those, and we'll come back with a few more questions. We have a Court of the Dead 2018 calendar. A lot of beautiful artwork here, some which is included on the card, some that's been used in our premium art print program as well, but a lot of these are Mourners and Court of the Dead figures and favorites. This is a favorite of mine in here. Eleanastus the Oracle, head of spirit, beautiful Victorian ghost with a floating head. And we also have a Court of the Dead journal. Memories are some currency in the underworld.
Absolutely.
So there's a little intro and outro from Death here talking about memories, encouraging you to write yours down. Some beautiful artwork by Rachel Rubicek, one of our in-house illustrators, designers. So speaking of Death and Mourners, Tom, Mourner, and E-R-S
it's late in
means
the day.
to mourn something. That's a pretty dark term to use as essentially, in exchange as the word for like citizen. Why did you pick such a macabre title?
Well, I think there's an aspect of sort of this hard scrabble rebellion that's at work here, and the conditions of the afterlife are such that they're kind of reappropriating terms that they know have kind of a negative connotation in the mortal realm, but that they tend to celebrate. So whether it's in their language and everything else, they tend to capture a lot of words that tend to have a sort of graverly context. But in their realm, they know that, well, the grave is not quite the end, it's a start to your own self-determination. So they celebrate that. So in the same way that, the Court of the Dead is kind of a flip the script kind of point of view. It's like, don't judge the book by its cover. So all of these characters that normally in many fantasy fictions are relegated to the, sort of the instant evil box, here they are clambering well out of that towards a more noble purpose or whatnot. And so that's kind of conveyed, again, in their terminology and the way that they, a lot of the art shows buildings and such like that sort of celebrate the skeletal form of things or whatnot. And they look at that as like architectural beauty and whatnot. So they're using that as kind of their art form and whatnot. And it was part of a way to kind of bring a sort of credibility to a world, not just one that was like, well, this is where all the ghosts and whatnot go. This is where they really put work in and made their own thing.
Classic kind of counterculture. Take something that's
Totally.
negative, make it positive, and an anthem, emblem. Pat, can you talk a little bit about, I can see there's a little guild figure in the bottom of every single Mourner card. What does that mean, and how do the Mourner cards relate to the guild figures?
Yeah, so this came up as a question on the Kickstarter page as well. So anytime that you're going to gain one of these Mourner characters, they kind of have a minion or follower of their own from one of the guilds. And so the figures don't represent these characters specifically. They're more behind the scenes working with you on the politics, while the guild figures that they have some sway over are out on the map and vying for control of areas and doing the dirty work on the ground. And so each of the Mourner cards comes with sort of this own loyal guild follower of their own, which is a guild mover that you have in play, as well as the power that's depicted on the card. So it's sort of a pair of characters that you're gaining every time you gain one of these cards.
Cool. All right, Lacey, can we pick some folks off of social for our winner? Who won our calendar?
The calendar goes to JJ Joe.
Oh,
JJ Joe, congratulations.
Stuck with us all day. Paid off, didn't it?
And our death memory journal. Who does that go to?
Francis Hernandez.
Hey,
All right,
congratulations, Francis. Great place to write down all your deepest, darkest memories and share them with death so they can live on into the afterlife. Do we have any questions on social?
There is a couple.
All right.
First off being, is it Etheria or Etheria?
Etheria.
Potato, right? Etheria.
Although if you're the one harvesting it, I guess maybe you get to say whatever you like. But
There's also high fives all around.
Oh, huzzah.
From John Page.
Thank you, John Page.
Awesome.
Thank you.
That's really about it, guys.
All right.
Alrighty.
Well, we're going to cut this one short. Thank you for signing in again. We will do one more. Oh, wait. You know what? Actually, we wanted to talk 5th player expansion really quick.
Let's do
Since
that.
we had funded and we reached our 48-hour quest, which means that all of the Unity tokens are now going to be this beautiful stamped metal. And this is a prototype, but the actual coins themselves will be a little bit higher fidelity and a different finish. But that means our next stretch goal, which is 100,000, is a 5th player expansion. Pat, can you tell us what is included in the 5th player expansion?
Yeah, so this is coming into the game because we know in the hobby space of 5th player expansion is always in high demand, and being able to get one more seat at the table. So you're going to get all of the componentry you need for that extra player. So another player board, another set of the ring bases, 2 more of each of the guild figures, which will round up the total figure count. Tokens, there's extra Unity tokens, more Etheria, and additional hidden objective or ulterior motive cards that work really well with a 5th player. So as Tom put it earlier, you get 20% more of everything just about to make the game playable with that 5th player. It really adds a lot of value. No more, leaving this one on the shelf when one extra friend shows up to game night. So it's going to be really nice if we hit that.
And so in all the rigorous play testing that you guys have done, how is a 5-player game different than a 4-player game in the Mourner's Call?
Yeah, so I'll kind of loop this into another question we had too, which is I've seen in quite a few different spaces, is how does a two-player game work? The twist feed we did last night was a two-player game, and so folks can kind of see how one plays out. The game works well at any of those player counts, but some of the strategic choices you make are different. In a fifth-player game, there's more players getting more figures onto the board. There's 5 dice now, so there's more Etheria that comes in each round, which means more dudes on the map, so to speak. And so things like the Dreadsbane Order token become really important to strategy, and when to gain extra figures, when to really manage the 2 tracks, as you have now 5 players pushing them up. Or in a 2-player game, you might only have 2 players affecting those tracks, but you can't be too greedy and go too off the rails because you're going to suffer for it. So
more mourners and Ilverness.
Oh, it totally it amps the pressure up a lot.
Yeah, and it really does make some really tough calls, especially in the final round of the game of like, ooh, do I move these figures out and where do I place them? What risks am I willing to take in a 5-player game? What's nice is that the game still is 1 action per turn in the action phase. So even with 5 players, it clips around the table pretty fast. And you're always, I find, paying attention to what everyone else is doing, where they're going. So, as one of the podcast reviews said, like, this is not the kind of game where even at 5 players, you're going to be on your phone and looking to fill that time. It's high action, and really everything is very integrated. So you need to be alert and attentive to the strategies of your opponents.
I definitely love that engagement. That's something that has been a part of the design from like even the earliest part. But now when you're getting 4 and 5 people, you think, oh, this is bogged down. And no, it's just, people are popping away at their decisions. It comes looping around. I think the use of the pass move, which we didn't talk about much, especially when you get 4 and 5 players, is really strategic because you'll get somewhere. You might have a card that's great, but you need to know what the next 3 characters in the blind are up to. So give it a pass, see what happens. And at 4 to 5 players, it gets pretty crazy. And again, if you switch to your phone, you're likely to miss something kind of crucial. There's a lot of reading your opponents that really makes the game and its intrigues really come to life.
And of course, a lot of those strategies tie into your faction affiliation. We were just showing off the enamel faction pins here. Don't forget to go to courtofthedead.com/quiz to take the quiz and find out what your faction is, so that you can pick your faction sleeve for the board game, and you'll get a free faction allegiance kit with one of these very cool pins, so you can show off your allegiance in a undercover cool kind of way, along with some other stuff that comes in that kit. So thank you for joining us. We'll be tuning back in again. Oh, looks like we have one more question.
Are there more stretch goals after the 100K?
Of course there are.
Absolutely.
But that's all we're going to say
to come
about that. So stay tuned. We'll be back around 5 p.m. PST for a final check-in and sign-off and answering any other questions. And who knows, maybe we'll have some other stretch goals that we can share and talk through with you guys. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Rise, Conquer, Rule.